Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh Dippold, and today I have Gabrielle Pimstone with me. Gabrielle, how's it going today?
Hey Josh, it's really going good, thank you. And hi to your listeners from Sydney, Australia.
Well, very cool. So, who is Gab? Who is Gab? Can I just call you Gabby? Is that
Yes, of
okay? Or
course, yes.
okay, that's cool for me. Okay, Gabby, who's Gabby, and what does she do? What kind of work does she do?
Well, I mean, that's such an existential question. So, I am somebody, I guess in a nutshell, I'm somebody who's been really very curious since a young age, since about age 7 or 8, been curious in about psychology and about spirituality. I had a trauma in my life when I was 9. My father passed away, and it was a big upheaval for me. And I started asking a lot of questions. And from a young age, I've been searching for meaning. So that's a really important part of who I am. And that led me on to my career, which for about 27 years was psychology, working in big corporates. But in the last few years, I've changed focus a little bit and I've moved more into the spiritual aspect. And I now, trained up as a level 3 energy master, and I bring that modality into my practice where I help people going through really big change, really big life transitions. I help them master their energy and move through it with great ease. So that's really just, I guess, summarizing my 50 plus years in a nutshell.
Well, right on. So, you did say Reiki level 3 practitioner. Is that what you said, or what was the level 3?
It's not Reiki.
Not Reiki.
It's actually it's similar but different to Reiki. Apparently, I'm not a Reiki master, but I know people who studied with me are Reiki masters. It's similar in that we use sacred geometry, advanced sacred geometry to do the work for us. But it's, my understanding from the people who study with me that have got a background in Reiki, that it's kind of Reiki on turbocharge, because we're not working with symbols, we're working with really advanced sacred geometry, which has potent energy. And of course, what that does is it just amplifies the healing process quite substantially. So it's similar but different.
Well, we could get into a lot of different things here. One of them is the notion of, but I probably not get into this because it's controversial and my knowledge is really lacking on it. How the Fibonacci sequence and the flower of life that some people call is then different from what the kind of Kalantic people or some of the Gnostic people call the crystal spiral, and what they call the true flower of life. And I don't have enough understanding really to talk about this. I know the numbers and the math is slightly different. And I know there's some people working with both angles. There's camps on both sides that, are saying one thing and another. I don't choose sides on this. I'm still very much in a learning process, but I think we can put that aside for the most part, because I just don't have the knowledge with a lot of sacred geometry. You're welcome to come in and talk and school me quite a bit about this, because I would love to learn a little bit about it.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think, but before we jump in there, why don't we just go back to how we compare to this? I mean, psychology in itself is just fascinating by its own, and then you've taken the leap to go, I would say, beyond that, or to get out of the narrow confines, I think, of, especially in a if you're corporate setting. So what exactly were you doing in the corporate world with psychology? And maybe if it's relevant to say a little bit about your training background, where you specialized and what you were doing in that, and maybe the transition out of that into the
Yeah.
things that you're doing today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a lot in what you've said. So if I miss anything you've asked, I'm just I've taken a couple of notes, but just help me come back to it. But you mentioned the narrow confines of psychology, and you know, I think the any one modality is limited, and so I'm a firm believer in mixing things up, in being eclectic in one's work. The more you layer, the more rich the solution is, I guess. And so for me, the narrow confines of psychology, really, it was an evolution, but it was more of an evolution that started in my own life and then kind of trickled into the work that I did. Because in 2020, during the pandemic, I was at an inflection point in my life. I was, in a constant state of hypervigilance, panic, anxiety, depression. Wasn't sleeping. There was a lot going on for me, and at that time, I'd been in talk therapy for most of my life because of the work that I did. And when I searched for answers there, nothing was working anymore. I couldn't get myself out of the situation that I'd found myself in, and so I started to search for a different modality to help me get out of the stuckness that I was in. And that search led me by a series of coincidences to energy work and energy mastery. So it was an evolution that started in my own life, and that then kind of landed up shaping what I did at work, because what I came to understand at that point was that, wedding yourself to one thing, and certainly something that keeps you in your head, can have its limitations. And so what I now do, what I did in the past, was I've always worked, and I guess there's a golden thread between what I did then and what I do now, which is I'm working with human transformation. People can be going through a healing journey, they can be going through a big life change. I'm helping them traverse that landscape. Now, in the past, I used to address it from kind of the vantage point of your limiting beliefs, your thoughts, the stories you tell yourself, your emotional state, and your identity, all the things that make up the world, the conversations in psychology. I would help people understand their inception point. Where did it come from? And kind of trying to work through things in the here and now. What I've come to understand in studying energy is that all those things that I've just described, our thoughts, our beliefs, our stories, the words we use, our actions, decisions, all of them are actually just energy. They have an energetic frequency. And so what I've learned to understand is that if you want to untangle all of that, instead of talking through it, which you need to understand what's happening, but instead of that being the only thing you do, what I now do is I go back to the energetic inception point. Where did that limiting belief start? Where did that destructive behavior pattern begin? And I go in, I read someone's energy, I go in, I find that inception point, the root where it all began. And that's what I help release. And it's incredible how things just really start expediting. Now, that inception point is, in psychology, you look to childhood for the inception points. I still look there, but I've got a bigger timeline that I'm looking at as well, because we know that some of our blocks can actually start in utero, when we're in our mother's womb. Some of them are passed down from generation to generation. Some of them are ancestral. So I've got a bigger frame of reference when it comes to looking for the inception point as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, pretty much. And I definitely want to spend the bulk of our conversation about the energy. It's the most fascinating. The other thing was just what did you? I was interested in, because I don't have much formal training in psychology. What modalities did you study at school and things like this?
Yes.
What were you specialized in anything at all?
Yes. Well, I actually studied organizational psychology. So I'm not a clinical psychologist. So I don't do therapy. I never did, but I did organizational therapy, helping organizations become more adaptive, have healthier coping mechanisms. Because, these big organizations they just, all they are is, lots and lots and lots of people coming together, and they face change, they face disruption. And so that's what I did. I helped large groups of people, sometimes 60,000 strong people, really slow down, notice what was happening to the system, get out of the destructive downward spiral patterns, the toxic corporate dynamics, and really learn to adapt more constructively to things happening in their environment. So my modality was organizational psychology, not clinical psychology. And in that, I specialized in human transformation, the human response to change.
Fascinating. If you don't mind me asking some follow-ups here, did you work with like senior management? Did you do individuals? Did you help them design how did that actually work when you sat down with the company then?
Yes. Well, in the end of it all, I was working with the top teams, because really a change in organizations begins. Well, it can start anywhere, but typically in big bureaucratic structures, you need to have the active and visible support of leadership, of the people making decisions, of decision makers. So, yes, the top, in some organizations, it was the top 10, in others, it was the top 250. One organization was the top 8,000. It was a big organization, but also individual teams, because teams are the unit of change as well. When teams become really functional, high performing, starting to stand out from the crowd, that becomes a catalyst for others to really change as well. And then, of course, individuals, working at it, doing individual coaching is a huge part of my practice as well. Not just senior leaders, but anyone who was really, needing to get perspective and have a little bit of a nudge forward. So those were the people that I worked with, and still continue to.
Very cool. Beautiful. And the synchronicity there, you said catalyst for change. Mm-hmm. That's a podcast series I was doing on my other website. So
wow.
That was interesting. Okay, well, now let's talk. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we were talking about catalysts. One of the biggest, when people are on a journey of change or healing, call it what you want, one of the biggest challenges is getting off the starting blocks. And so we do need a catalyst. And one of the things that I teach people, most of us wait for, like the crisis as the catalyst, diagnosis, a health diagnosis, or the end of a relationship, or whatever the case may be. But actually the catalyst can come from moments of awareness and insight. And that's what I teach people. So how do you find those moments where you read a book or you read an article and you start applying it to your life and you have one of those aha moments? That's the other way that we get the ball rolling.
It is. And with the meditation practice and a little bit of a background in Buddhism, some other ways come to mind are like inspiration. Someone, yes. You see someone like, yes. Wow, look at them. What did they do? How did they do it? Get really inspired by them. Another way is just, I think it's called Samvega. It's just like this spiritual urgency. There's a kind of a realization, like you said, that, okay, wow, I really have limited time here in the grand scheme of things. How can I really apply myself here? Something will come in, and mine's basically gone now, but at a certain time, I was locked in to this spiritual urgency. Like, I now have a window of opportunity to do this. The energy is there for it, the drive. I kind of have the faith, the motivation and the supports. All these different factors can come in with the spiritual urgency thing. But like you say, mostly it's crisis driven, and oppositional.
It's interesting that you talk about the spiritual urgency, because some of that was happening for me as well, Josh. I don't know how woo-woo can I get woo-woo on this podcast?
Oh, please. Yes. Go as woo as you want.
All right, let's go there. So I actually, in all of this, when I was in that depressing job and I was just so anxious, I started channeling, and my spiritual gifts had never opened up. And suddenly I was clairaudient, but the clairaudience was coming in a way that I couldn't really understand. So this is how it started to present itself. I would wake up a few mornings a week, maybe 3-4 mornings a week, and I would get a sound bite. As I was waking up, I'd hear a sound bite in it was English, but it was like ancient English. I understood the words, but I couldn't make sense of the meaning. And that was my spiritual urgency, because I wanted to understand, what is this about? Like, I wasn't scared. It wasn't threatening, but I knew there was something like a spiritual gift was opening. And I knew that I was being supported and actually taken off the starting blocks. That was my catalyst as well. So I just wanted to mention that, because, yes, you're right. The catalyst can come in a more spiritual way as well.
Well, fascinating. I'm definitely interested in these type of things. So I will ask you, did you ever inquire into whose voice it was? And also, you're saying it's ancient English. Were you able to transcribe the message and later reflect and find out what it was? Or give me a little more detail
I'm happy to do that. So it was just like old-fashioned English. And I knew it was coming from something from the outside, but it had a little bit of a kind of, I wouldn't say dark tone, but it focused on things like, I had one message that made me realize one of my pets was about to die, and actually 10 days later, she did pass away. So that kind of stuff. And I never worked out what it was from, but my channeling has since shifted, which is really interesting now. Because, well, it's not interesting because I've kind of built it, but now I don't channel from an external entity. I channel from my higher self. And I don't know anyone else who does that. I think most people channel from, an ascended master or whatever. Mine is, it comes in my voice, and I know there's some ancient wisdom from lived experience somewhere in my origins that I'm drawing from. And it's helpful. It helps people. It's like this generalized wisdom. What I do is I translate, comes to me in English, and I give it to the person as it comes. And then it's always generic enough. Not generic, that's not the right word. It's specific, but they then can make sense of what I'm saying for their life. So it's shifted, but I would say it's more higher self channeling now than anything else.
These things, there's a lot of different labels and there's a lot of different experiences. I like really looking into these too, because yes, I am turned off from the traditional way of channeling things, because to me, that means that something has to come in to me, and I don't know, a lot of times I don't know if someone's being an imposter or something like that. And if there's not protection, I've heard certain things. And even, what is the message about there's a really famous channeled book, and I forget what it is now. I'm blanking on the title of it, but there's accounts in that book where she's really sick a lot of times because things have come in. But that's the downside. The upside is what you're saying. You can get guidance, connection, and even if it's not traditional channeling, some other ways, like you're saying, people are in contact with their higher self. That's what they call it. And that's a whole nother topic, what that actually is. My fiance has some different ideas of what that may actually be. But at the end of the day, or it could be just intuitive wisdom. We can be getting these messages, and a lot of people that become, they talk about voices and things. I wonder sometimes that, most, from my experience in meditation, a lot of people will either think predominantly in images, which I feel is most people. But then there's some people that think predominantly in words. And so if you have a person who predominantly thinks in images, and then all of a sudden they're having audio material or thoughts, they might be thinking they're hearing voices or what's going on, or they're not in tune with their inner voice, and vice versa. If someone usually is used to thinking in words, and then all of a sudden they sit down and they have all this flash of images that they hardly ever get, they might think they're hallucinating or something, or they don't know what's going on. I guess the other one is, some people, even rare, will think in images of the words themselves, like you're looking at the text of a book. That's the more rare form, from what I understand. But this intuitive knowing too can come up. So all these different messages, at the end of the day, the way I look at it is like, okay, look at it at the end result, at face value. This is information. Is it helpful or is it not? How do I feel with this information?
That's exactly
before,
right.
during, and after, right?
That's
what is
exactly
the energetic tone around this? And what is the intent around this? How can this be used? So all those things come into play when we're looking at things like this, right?
That's right. Josh, can I go back? Because you said so much. I've been taking notes.
I know. I throw a lot out there. Yes. Please go back.
Can we just go back a couple of steps?
Sure, please.
So, you're talking about, you were referencing, not wanting external entities to come into your energetic field. And I get that. I was terrified when I started this process. And what I came to understand was that your vibration is your protection. If you do the work to raise your energetic vibration, that's what shift. So that, I think, was the difference between when I started channeling, which were kind of a little bit low vibrational messages coming in. It sometimes felt a little bit, took me aback. And the messages that I channel now, which are always kind of helpful. That tone, as you put it, is really, really different. But, I had an experience in my level 3 training. I was actually in Colorado, in the USA. And I was at the live event. And one of my really close friends who was on the journey with me, and I know she won't mind me talking about this, I won't talk about who she is, but she actually channels light language. And at the event, we were doing like, I can't even remember the exercise, but an entity took over and she started channeling. There were like 30 or 40 of us in the room. She started channeling it was on behalf of some entity that was holding the sorrow of the world. And it was really, really difficult for her. And it was interesting because you spoke about, she was knocked out afterwards for a day. She couldn't get out of bed, And so the work that we do to circumvent that is to really keep our vibration clean and, we practice energetic hygiene. So that's an important one. And the other thing that you were talking about that's so important is the way the way information comes to us is different. We've all got different spiritual senses. We have access to all of them, but we have a dominant spiritual gift. As I said earlier, I hear things. So it's clairaudience. You spoke about clairvoyance. People see images. That's clairvoyance. I've experienced another interesting one once, clairtangience, which is clairsatience, which is the taste. I actually channeled my late grandfather. He came into my room. It was a beautiful experience, and through taste and through smell, which was interesting. You also reference, I think it's clairsentience, which is that just knowing. You look at something, you just know. So, we all have these beautiful spiritual gifts. They're not to be feared. They're like an internal GPS. And we turn them off when we are born, when we are younger. And some of us are lucky enough to find them later in life.
Absolutely. Well, mine, I don't know if I would, little pieces here and there, but during meditation, years and years of meditation, it just it just happens to people. It's not really that uncommon for people that meditate a lot. And claircognizance, I think, is that internal note, and sentience, I think, is sensing with the body. Maybe
you're probably right.
I don't either way, but it is really the smell and taste. That's a really rare one. Because, if we look at like traditional psychological or psychiatric hallucinations, that's the most rare for people to have smell and taste hallucinations. Yeah. Now, we all know when we're sick, some things might taste a little bit off, but that's not the same thing.
No, it's not.
It seems fairly rare. Yeah.
Well, it came fleetingly. It's not my primary one. I had an experience when I was studying, and we before one of the lessons dropped, about a month before the lesson dropped, I walked around for about 4 days with a feeling of like an orange bubble around me. And it was like the soft, spongy kind of, it was lovely. But it also gave me these incredible cravings. I had food cravings. I drove down to the local bakery one day and I bought an entire loaf of white bread and I devoured it. I mean, I watch my weight. That's not, I went out to the shops, the next day and I just was craving ripe peaches. So I bought and I just ate peaches. And a month later, the lesson dropped and it was around this archangel whose color is recognizable by orange. And all the attributes and characteristics of this archangel were the kind of that feeling of safety, that feeling of being cushioned, all of that I was experiencing. And, that was there was a mix of things happening. There was definitely, because I didn't, what maybe you can help me untangle it. I didn't see orange, but I felt orange, clairsentience. I was craving, like my mouth, there was something around taste, and there was also a sense of psychic. Like I knew what was coming, like a lesson dropped a month later that was all about this. So, I encourage people to really activate their spiritual gifts. And one of the things that I do, Josh, I've got the sacred geometry that can help activate dormant gifts. They can be spiritual gifts, they can be latent potential, whatever it is. And I've got a couple of people that I'm working with now in my private practice that have come to me wanting me to activate their spiritual gifts. One feels like she's got mediumship that's starting to brew, and the other one has started channeling. She's got this buzzing in her ear. I know all the signs. And, they know that this is the answer, because once they activate whatever's waiting and wanting to come out, they're going to be guided in ways that they can't imagine now. That's the beauty.
These experiences can be very profound too. With the orange thing, a few things come up. The synesthesia. Do you know this, where people will not necessarily that, because it doesn't sound exactly like that, but it sounded similar, where people will hear colors or taste sounds, this type of things, where the senses kind of get intermingled.
I think
I
you're
wanted
right.
to ask you though, did the archangel associate with this? Was it later that they appeared and told you this, or did they do it right away? And if they didn't do it right away, I was wondering why they didn't come in right away. And
no, actually, the actual lesson itself was was the formal curriculum in the program that I was studying.
Oh, interesting.
So it wasn't a lesson that dropped, from the ethers to me. It was part of the curriculum.
Interesting.
And I remember taking it to one of the mentors one week and saying, "Oh, I've just had this crazy experience. I've had orange." And she said to me, "This is a lesson you're going to be learning about in the curriculum in a month's time." So that was it. So it wasn't, the timing was right, but what was happening, the lesson in that moment was, oh gosh, these are my spiritual senses opening up. What do I do with them?
Well, there's another one, precognition. So you were perhaps precogging what was coming. I mean, that's a common one. I noticed that's really the most common thing, I think, is when we're in danger, like on the highway. If somebody's going to go into our lane, some people might know, they might know a few moments before that might happen. They got a feeling or just a notion that somebody might do that, and then they adjust their driving behavior. So this is really fascinating to me. So I'd like to. So the unlocking the gifts, yes, I totally agree, because sometimes. There's a few things about that. Sometimes people are blocked in whatever ways. I mean, we can get into different influences and factions that my fiance calls that are deliberately doing this to block people's gifts and whatnot. It could just be a blockage internally, psychologically, energetically. That could be more of our responsibility. So it could be any number of things. Sometimes we're not ready yet, So if people want to force this just because they think it's cool, I think they could potentially do some damage. But like you're saying, most people that are interested in this, they don't go, well, some of them do, but a lot don't go into it willy-nilly. They take it seriously, do precautions and things like this.
Oh yeah.
Yes. So I'm fascinated now about this this training you've done. So tell me again the name of the group and the training, and it just what can you say more about this?
Well, it's called Geo Love Healing, and I worked with, I think...
Can you spell it? Really quick.
Geo, which is geometry.
Sure.
Geometry.
Okay.
And love. So the geometry that we use is the kind of light, the information. And if we have too much information coming in, we can implode. So the love is the antidote to that. Geo Love. And I mean... Not just in this particular methodology, but all these kinds of programs, what they offer is a safe container. So we have to build our energetic capacity before we can play around with advanced sacred geometry. It's a graduated process. You don't go in and start working with the flower of life. You mentioned that earlier. I'll tell you a story about the flower of life in a moment. But, there's simples. There's firstly, you got to work on yourself. You got to clear your blocks. You've got to raise your vibration. Then you learn simple sacred geometry, and then it builds and grows from there. So you're absolutely right. That has to be done in a safe container, somebody who knows what they're talking about, and somebody who can help put the right parameters in place so that you don't go from 0 to 100 in 5 seconds. You'd implode. Yeah.
These are all good points. And I also encourage discernment too, when working with groups and programs to do they invite investigation? And I'm not talking about, because I know sometimes even me, if it depends where our questioning comes from. Obviously, if I'm questioning from a place of, oh, you're wrong, or, this is bad, or, in accusatory tone, or I want to one-up someone. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a genuine interest in learning and knowledge and betterment for our long-term well-being and happiness and that of others. And in how we do it too, because I know I've struggled with that in the past, especially is, people are just as, and some people even more so, about how we say things, not just what we say, but how we say it, And so, and I haven't done, I'm not a magical practitioner. I've looked into some of these systems just to kind of see what it's about and how the energy and things like this occur. And then I can sense some of these things when they're going on, and maybe not. But so some of this stuff gets really deep when we talk about working with energy and creating constructs and things. I mean, some people with abilities, they can see behind things, and what's presented to us sometimes is not the whole story. Sometimes there's, according to some, there's overlays. So some beings may appear as something they're actually not. They some construct has been created by a group for various purposes and may actually have different intents and purposes than what's given kind of exoterically or whatever. There may be secret intentions or esoteric or internal intentions. And then when we get into different groups, there's different grades and levels, and where at one level might not have the whole picture that more of an inner circle has. And while the same information may apply, it applies in a different way, or we don't know. And a lot of these things, from what I understand, are there for protection too. We don't go. It's like giving a toddler like a blowtorch. We don't do that. Some of these initiations, like you're saying, in training are there for safety reasons. So
very much so. Very, very much so. I've forgotten what I was going to say. I had something.
It's okay.
Forget it.
It's all right. I do want to go into. Okay, go ahead, please.
So when you're kind of listening to people talk about their programs, there's a really good safety check. Go inside yourself as you're hearing the person talk and promoting, and go within and ask yourself, how do I feel? Do I feel heavy or light? That's the litmus test. And you have to be very, very discerning. Very discerning.
Absolutely. Some people do muscle testing, just that intuitive. Do I feel energized or do I feel drained? Do I feel constricted or do I feel expansive? That's a very good thing. And we can't really go on pleasure all the time, because, heroin, I think, is very pleasurable to a lot of people.
I wouldn't know.
Follow your bliss, right?
Bliss.
But that's what I'm told too. So, all right, now let's talk about how we use this to help people, to be in service to others, this energetic knowledge you have, and how we can use it to help others. And I guess just kind of general advice for people that are looking into different energy modalities and training as well. What would you say to these people starting off, and just in general?
Well, I mean, I'd say to them what we've just spoken about, be discerning, listen to your intuition, be guided by that. But what I teach people and what in practical terms, because, I'm working with potent energetic patterns, but you don't have to know that. What clients learn and experience from me are five things. How do you understand your energy? How do you understand your energy? So, what's your energetic state in any given point in time? That's part of keeping track of the downward spiral and making sure that you're in tune and you're responding and from a kind of a place of higher consciousness. So, in any given moment, what is my energy? Understanding your energy. Second one is protecting your energy. I think that's really a big one. It's up. We started touching on it earlier when we were speaking about channeling, but in more everyday experiences, we interact with people everywhere we go, and we are connected to people through energetic cords. And so we're constantly giving out and absorbing energy. So, how do we protect our energetic fields? A very important one. The third thing I teach people is how do you clear very basic techniques for clearing energetic blocks in your energetic body. These are things that have been with us most of our lives, that have compounded over time, and that have become like an invisible handbrake holding us back. How do you clear those? Fourth thing is how do you maintain your energy? How do you move through the fluctuations? And how do you interrupt patterns that pull you down? And the fifth thing that I teach people is how do you optimize your energy? How do you access those gifts? How do you access that latent, dormant talents that are just waiting to be activated? So those are the five things. Those are the five ways that I serve people and teach them how to work with energy in very pragmatic ways.
It's very great, and I'm sure you have a lot more details. And what I meant to say earlier on is this notion of skillful means,
Yeah.
not limiting oneself to just one thing. You have this great psychological background, but then you go into this, and then you're reading clients and knowing how to tailor a teaching and modality just for them too. I think that's very, very helpful.
Yes.
And it's also in kind of line with the Buddhist thing of on the right effort. So that's
Yes.
that's getting rid of things that's not helpful, preventing it from coming back again, basically, then maintaining the states that are skillful and
Yes.
helpful, and then generating new states that are skillful
That's
and
the
helpful. But
that's
yours
the
is
thing.
kind of it's a little bit vague. I mean, we know what we learn or feel our way into that, but I like your kind of more modern terminology and practicalities of this.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yes, you're welcome. The energy work is my fiance just stresses that time and time again. She has her own thing with hands-on energy work,
Yes.
and the clearing and the absorbing people's energy is that's and the protection, preventing it to begin. So yeah, I'm sure you have wealth of knowledge in each of those areas. So so it's really cool. So I'm trying to think of maybe just give one example of how about clearing. What do you recommend people about clearing energy or
Well, I
certain
mean,
energies
I
and
can't.
hygiene?
Yeah, I can't
Mhm.
teach the practice, but there
Sure.
are ways that you
Mhm.
scan for blocks and
Okay.
then release and then remove them. But on a more pragmatic basis, there are very simple things that we can do to clear our energy. And what I'm going to give you is probably not going to help you get to the root cause of deep energy blocks that you need, the tactics and the protocol to do. But simple things like the energy of elementals is very, very powerful for clearing out our energy. So for me personally, I'm drawn to the fire energy. So if I go into the sun for 2 or 3 minutes in the middle of a busy day, I can feel the transmutation happening. For other people, water does it for them. It's very cleansing, and particularly salt water. So, putting Epsom salts in your bath at night or if you're lucky enough to live by the sea, going for a swim in the ocean. For others, it's about earth energy. So really, I know somebody who literally only wears shoes to work, but walks around barefoot all the time. That's his way of connecting in with Mother Earth energy, which is very grounding, very stabilizing, and very nourishing, and it flushes through your system. Wind energy, actually, I don't really like that energy, but for some people, it kind of really does shift and move their energetic state and flush out things. So we can tap into nature's energetic properties to do the work for us. And that's a simple way of doing that. For some people, taking that just a little bit further, some people use crystals, but I stopped using crystals a long time ago because what I realized was that I've got it within me. I don't need, like I can do the work from within. But for some people, they use the healing properties of crystals to do the work. There was a time where I walked around with, the darker crystals in my handbag when I went to work to kind of protect me from what was happening. The dark crystals, like smoky quartz, I remember carrying that, they take the hit. And so that helps you just clear things out a bit. So there are simple things that we can do.
Very good. Yeah, the crystal allies are amazing. Just were talking about this the other day that some people, they don't give back to the crystal community. It's just all about exploiting them for healing. I mean, that sounds pretty woo woo, but yes, we can work with them. But I mean, a lot of people just assign human emotions and human are just projections onto them and use what they can get from them. So I don't know, maybe we think about talking to the rock or asking the rock what it wants, what we can do for, it sounds a little bit, but yeah, instead of is there anything we can give back energetically to the crystal community too? And the other thing I thought about with the wind, because wind seems very kind of, I can always go put my feet on the ground, which I love doing. The sun is available most days when it's clear, and if you probably live by some kind of body of water, creek, lake, something like this. But the wind, we don't really know. But the breath, right? The breath, it's not a hugely energetically charged object, so it brings an alignment. If we're maybe under emotional or over emotional, it's such a great balancing tool. It's just being aware of our breathing.
It really is. The other thing, when you were talking about breath work, I was thinking I've been doing yoga for 30 years.
Oh, yes, of course.
Movement, physical movement is a really simple way of shifting energy. And I know it sounds corny and a bit hackneyed, but if you're feeling stuck, here's a simple thing. Like I'm sitting at my desk, I'm working, and I've run out of ideas. If I physically move to another part of the house and do my work from there, something shifts in my internal world as well as physically. But also physical, like, stretching, short bursts of, high impact movement, dancing, putting on a song, dancing to it. These are real profound ways to shift energy. I remember when one of my pets was dying, and she'd been around, she was about 21 years old, I mean, ancient. That was the cat, by the way, that I spoke about earlier. And Elaine, she'd passed away. She'd actually, and I was bereft. And I remember waking up at 2 a.m. and not knowing how to lie still. I was in such grief. And I put on my AirPods, turned on Spotify, and I danced for about 10 minutes, got back into bed and had a peaceful night's sleep. So there are very simple but profound ways that we can shift energy quickly.
Yeah, I hear time and time again that dancing can do that. And even walking for me, because when the energy is too much, it brings it down. If it's not enough, it can bring it up. So if we're in a space to do that, going from a different space, I don't hear that one as much, but it does really make a difference. Some spaces can just be problem spaces sometimes, different times of the day too.
Yes.
And I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but there'll be something where I'll forget What I want to remember, and then I just go back in the room or the space where I first occurred to me, and then
Yes,
sometimes I will remember. It's so bizarre
isn't
how
it?
these things work like that, you know?
That's a great example. The other thing
Yes.
I'm thinking of, in terms of physically shifting things are power poses. So if you're feeling flat or if you're feeling like you're just giving up or you don't have any power anymore, you can actually stand. Whoopsie, you can do a power pose, stand up straight, put your arms, strongly by your side. Just for that moment, what you're doing is you're shifting everything at an energetic level. So, yeah, I mean, I guess my message in all of this is that you don't have to be an energy master to be able to master your energy.
Very good. And the body is so vital in all of this, obviously, especially
Very.
for guys, because sometimes I'm like head on wheels sometimes,
Right.
those of us who live in our heads sometimes, so
That
getting
was
into our
me.
body, obviously, yeah. Well, Gabby, this has been great. Why don't you
Fun.
we'll start wrapping this up.
Yeah.
What kind of things do you want to draw people's attention to? How people can work with you as a client? If you have any, I don't know, courses,
Mm.
books, trainings, events coming up, how can people find you in general? And then what a message would you like to leave folks with today?
Well, in terms of finding me and programs, I think my website's the best way to find me, and you'll see a couple of programs there. If you're someone who really benefits from working in groups, I've got a 28 days to healing program. Came from my own experience where I kind of was looking for a bite-sized way to shift things quickly. And I came up with this product. It's a small group program. It's a month, 28 days to healing, and we really shift the biggest thing holding you back in 28 days. And you'll find a bunch, if you prefer the privacy of a one-on-one environment. I've got so many coaching programs and packages to suit your needs. And what that does in that process, you're center stage. Your healing takes center stage. And so, I work with people for anything from 6 weeks to 12 months in that regard. So hop onto my website. That's the best way to see what this is all about. I've got some video clips talking about it. It's it's generative growth.com.au. Michelle will be in your notes. And the best way to follow me is, if you're more in the professional world, I'm very active on LinkedIn. But if you're into other means of social media, follow me on Instagram, Gabrielle.Pimstone. And you also asked for a parting message. My parting message would be that energy runs the show. If you want epic transformation in your life, go down to the energetic level and you'll see things move quickly and sustainably. So that would be my message.
Well, great. And may all beings everywhere come to know their most optimal, ideal energy and how to best go about it. Gabby, thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Bye now.